Hey guys, ConnorTsunami here, and today I'm going to talk about something that's probably going to annoy a few people. Now, the thing I want to talk about today is related to the not-so-fantastic side of Japan, or really any country, to be perfectly honest, because no country is perfect, but there's always these few instances that show out in particular countries and certain examples that we don't really want to see or admit. Now, I know that a lot of the viewers on this channel are probably very Japan enthusiastic people, or they live in Japan themselves. So there's going to be the side of people who understand and know this issue because they've experienced it themselves or they've seen it themselves before. And then there's going to be the people that horribly disagree with it because either they don't want to believe it, or it's just never happened to them before because they either live in an area where it's never happened to them before, or they just have never heard of it happening before because they live overseas. The thing I really want to talk to you about today is based on a video that Ken Tanaka, a very popular and very good J-vlog, not a J-vlogger, but part of the YouTubing community here in Japan, put up about a week ago on some reactions that some Japanese people have to people speaking English. And I think the video's name was along the lines of, "But I'm speaking Japanese." So I'll put a link to that in both the description, and I'll also put a little box in the corner of the screen right now, an annotation, so you guys can go check out the video. And I want you to watch that before you watch the remainder of this video, because it's very important that you understand exactly what I'm saying by watching it. Okay? Watched it? Good. Now, if you watched it carefully, you would have noticed that it was a very comical and forced, sort of skit showing that Japanese people sort of ignore the fact that foreigners can speak Japanese and will automatically sort of gravitate towards the more oriental-looking people if they're around them in places like stores and such, because they're more comfortable with that sort of a face because that's what they're around, and yet sort of ignore foreigners a little bit. Now, a lot of people in Japan might argue, "But Connor, that doesn't happen here. It's never happened to me before." Now, let me ask you, where do you live? See, I had this issue with another J-vlogger's video who I won't name, but people seem to be, in Japan at least, kind of a little bit ignorant sometimes towards the fact that this sort of stuff does happen a bit more frequently than they believe. Not because it's just a racism thing that happens everywhere sometimes, and I wouldn't even go so far as to call this racism so much as they're just kind of uncomfortable a little bit with something that's out of their depth because they're not used to it. But it does happen in Japan specifically because Japan is something of a slightly closed-off nation as far as a lot of things with foreigners is concerned goes. This is because a lot of their renditions of what foreign affairs and things are like comes purely from media such as games or movies, and not very much of the information they get or how they think of foreigners is actually fact. So I wouldn't take everything I'm about to say as stone or concrete, but give it a bit of thought, because this is how I've seen it at least, and I wouldn't be surprised if there are probably a few people who thought the same way. So right now I'm going to bring up some of the comments from that video, Ken Tanaka's video on, the issue, and I'll show you sort of two sides to the story and sort of how other people have seen it. So here's a good one. This simply cannot be happening in real life. No, people are not that retarded. This is alluding to how Japanese people assume because someone is gaijin they can't speak Japanese, right? Tell me that's what this is talking about. Now, the thing is with this comment is that they don't want to believe this happens. It does. It does happen. It's happened to me. Back when I lived in Toyama Prefecture last year, a couple of times I went into places like restaurants and such just by myself, and they asked me if I was with anyone Japanese that they could speak to. And even though I was speaking like straight Japanese to them, they would look for someone Japanese instead to talk to because they were just a bit uncomfortable talking with a foreigner because they thought that something they said might not quite connect. So the thing is that some Japanese people simply don't feel, like I've said before, comfortable, but at the same time there's also situations where they're kind of like, I can't blame them, because a lot of foreigners do come to Japan with absolutely no knowledge of Japanese whatsoever. But then at the same time, a lot of them do also do research, or they come with a bit of knowledge, and they all get grouped together and treated the same. So there will be some situations where the waitresses are like, "Oh, can I take your order, please?" And then the customer will be like, "Sorry, I don't speak Japanese, can you speak English?" No, dude, of course they can't speak English. They're Japanese. You shouldn't expect them to. You should have come here prepared. And it's because of situations like this that Japanese start getting this thought pattern that maybe I can't speak English, so maybe if there's someone who's Asian looking that might be Japanese, maybe I should ask them instead. As for the video, in this instance, it's kind of clear that even though they're clearly speaking Japanese and saying, hey, I'm speaking Japanese, you can listen to me and what I want you to order for me. So, the thing is that I wouldn't go so far as to saying that I personally think that things go quite that far, because I actually think that if someone outright said, yes, I can speak Japanese, or I was raised in Japan, they would probably take a second to listen to them. But as far as I'm aware, there have actually been a couple of cases where they've been that uncomfortable with foreigners that they just couldn't do it. So, I have this to say, to anyone who's Japanese that is watching this and understands English, don't take this personally. I don't believe that Japanese, like all Japanese, are like this. It's of course only the few that might feel a little bit uncomfortable or embarrassed or sort of strange talking to a foreigner in Japanese, which personally I think is a great thing. Being able to speak between, like, cross the language barrier because someone studied one language, or if they try to speak to you in English, that's fantastic. It's amazing. But to those of you who think that what I'm trying to do is Japan bash here, that's not what I'm doing at all. Okay, so let's move on to another comment. One maybe supporting this time the fact that this has all been happening. Okay, so here's another one. Someone has posted, I can't +1 this enough. I would always get this even when I was with some Asian friends. One naive Japanese even ran off to try and find an English speaker instead of taking the time to help me find the train station. And see, even if it's not inside a train station, this stuff can still happen, and it still does happen. So, I want you guys to go through, after the stuff that I've just shown you, the 2 examples, and read this yourself. Read the comments, take the 2 sides in, but understand that while a lot of you won't want to believe this happens, and you won't want to believe it, trust me, if it didn't happen to me, I wouldn't want to either, but it does happen, and it does sometimes depend on where exactly you live. In big cities, where they're a little bit more used to foreigners coming in and out, it's probably a little less prominent than some prefectures like where I live, Toyama, or even further down south, past Kyoto and down near Kyushu. I would imagine it might be a little bit more frequent because they're just not used to foreigners. They just don't know what to do in the situation that a foreigner doesn't speak Japanese. And even when they do speak Japanese, it just doesn't quite click in their head that they're speaking Japanese, and maybe they need a bit of help with it. But don't be fooled, it does happen, and I really don't want to get into any fights over this. I don't want any hate comments like, no, that doesn't happen. Of course that doesn't happen in Japan. Japan is perfect. Yeah, dude, I'm sorry, but it kind of does. But this sort of thing happens in other countries too. Say, for instance, in America, a Japanese person goes to the US and wants to go into a burger restaurant. Now, this person has majored in English in university, for example, or they've just studied in their own time or in high school or whatever. But the waitress or waiter comes up to take their order and automatically sees that they're Japanese. And when the Japanese person tries to speak in English but in a Japanese accent, the English person just doesn't quite get it, you know? So it may happen in other countries as well. So I'm not faulting Japanese only for it. I would fault every country for this because every country is equally as, able to make the same, I wouldn't say even mistake, but just cause the same problem as is happening in Japan. But this is quite a prominent issue in Japan with foreigners sometimes as well. And I would really like to see it disappear. I mean, I have to say, it would probably be much better for Japan as far as tourists go if people were just a little bit more confident with the way they approach other people. Now, I know that you guys are probably going to have some hate comments, so I suppose go ahead and leave them and I'll respond. If you guys have any opinions or anything you want to say on the matter, please do let me know. I believe that Ken Tanaka has shown a pretty apt view on this issue, so by all means, please watch it, share it with friends, show them it's a funny skit to say the least. But skit aside, it's also a slight issue that he's parodying, so I kind of wanted to speak about it a little. So that's pretty much my time for today, guys. Tomorrow I'm going to be doing a vlog as well. Instead of doing my 2-day gap, tomorrow I'm going out to Shinagawa to go to a barbecue party at Gogo Nihon. So I'll take some video footage there and then I'll vlog the next day. So I'll see you guys then. But for today, Tsunami signing out.